I'm thinking about Los Angeles, I'm thinking about Hollywood, I'm thinking about the film industry, I'm thinking about friendship, I'm thinking about loneliness, I'm thinking about what it means to live on the planet Earth and what it means to live off Laurel Canyon, what it means to live in this city, what it means to be so connected to everything around us and so isolated, to know people and to not know people, and to be together and to be alone. And all of this is crashing down on me while I'm watching this film. And I'm trying to think of what I'm going to be able to ask you at the end of it that's going to make it all kind of come together. Like you said, how do you connect the dots? How do you make sense out of the patterns? And this is something, as your filmography continues to grow, this is a puzzle that I'm thrilled to constantly be turning around. I never feel like I'm going to solve it. I never feel like I'm going to be able to kind of get to the point that you guys are when you're making this, of understanding how it all fits. So I guess my first big question for you, looking at this movie in against the breadth of your work, your previous work, how does this fit for you? How do you describe this story? You know, where does it come from for you?
Well, first off, I now fully understand where the monologues and Midnight Mass come from.
You know what's funny is I was actually, you said that, and if you didn't talk first, I was just going to turn the question around on you and just be like, you feel like everything you just said and what we're, I don't know, this movie for us was always about the intimacy in people expressing what they think the biggest mysteries of the universe are to them. Even if you're not ultimately friends, there's still an intimacy to it, and the beauty of that, and how it can so easily cross over into a need for belief, and then it turns dark. But in just discussing it, that's the beauty of it. And I was going to turn around on you and just be like, oh, well, Midnight Mass, every monologue of Midnight Mass, that's what it is, right? That's people just talking about the biggest mysteries in the universe and achieving some sort of human connection and intimacy via those conversations, right?
I have the feeling with a lot of your work that I'm sitting at a dinner party and I'm listening to the two smartest people in the room have a conversation. And I'm trying to kind of keep up with it.
The two smartest?
Yes. No. And that's kind of the thing, is that, you know, there's this incredible education that comes along with your work too, because you're dealing with very real things. You're dealing with very real theories. You're dealing with very real phenomena. You're dealing with physics. You're dealing with science. You're dealing with history. And you so casually toss it out. And they're like, you know, it just so happens that, you know, there's this story about Pythagoras, or, you know, have you ever heard of this particular thing? It comes flying out at you, but it all feels like it's part of this incredible symphony that you've written. I mean, this is a movie that now changes the Ode to Joy for me forever. You know, and thank you for that. Now it's going to be deeply creepy every time I hear it.
Yeah, there is very much a conversational aspect to our incubation process. It has a lot less to do with, like, I just read this great book, and let's springboard off of that, and it's a very meandering human sort of process that resembles more like, you know, cigarettes and coffee and beer kind of like films that you see the conversations inspire us, and not just in our own, not just in our work, but in everyday life. It's actually, it's our favorite small talk. I guess the way to say it is just being like, you can start with something like, have you ever seen a UFO? And by the way, if anyone here has, it changes your reality. You know, I have never seen that, but it's that kind of idea where it's this the structure of our own existence coming into question. When you have that conversation every once in a while, it's kind of creepy and very profound, and you remember it. But when it's something where it's a bit of a touchstone for you, where when we kind of get bored, that's what we start talking about with each other, it gets more normal, and the fear of the unknown dissipates, and you start getting down into the brass tacks of exactly what this whole thing is. And then you realize that you are spinning off down these rabbit holes just like these characters in the movie, and you maybe need to pull the brakes.
But you're for all of the fascinating topics of conversation that you guys are tapping into, and this is true of everything that you guys have ever done. For all of that, for all of the grand ideas, you're also talking about very grounded, very very relatable human emotion, you know, that, let's talk about Spring a little bit, you know, for all of the grand cosmic Lovecraftian horror of that, it's a love story. It's a story about the nature of love. It's a story about the nature of identity. This, to me, felt so much about people who needed connection in a big city, and about loneliness, and about rationalization, you know. You're always mining something that's very relatable, and that you wrap it in this kind of mesh of very complex ideas, I think, is part of what makes your work. How do you guys decide? Because, and not to get too tangential, but you made this in the middle of a hurricane of other work that you're doing, right? And at a time in your careers where you're working on a scale that's very much driven. You know, you're doing Marvel work. You know, this is driven toward a huge audience, toward being part of that pop culture phenomenon that is Marvel Entertainment. In the middle of all of that, in the middle of Moon Knight and going off to Loki, you do this, right? Tell me about how and when you decided to make this movie, and when you made it.
The first part of your question, you were saying, you made a reference to Spring, which was our second feature was a movie called Spring. Well, you guys are, thank you for applauding. Actually, but something we always brag about is we're like, oh yeah, Spring, you know, Mike Flanagan gave notes on that. Because we sent you an early version.
I love that movie. I love that movie very much.
We just brag about you giving us feedback on it and the second cut or whatever. But the idea of going and making this around the time we were making some of the bigger stuff we've been, I don't want to say bigger, just stuff that is there's more trucks and more crew and all those things. While we were doing this, we did a show called Archive 81. We did a show called. Did you guys see it? 'Cause that was awesome.
Yeah.
That was a really good show.
We met the original podcaster 2 nights ago. Came to a screening of Something in the Dirt. It was super cool to actually meet the person who created the work.
And I should also say when I say we did it, we directed a couple episodes. We were gifted this amazing, creative, really interesting mythology, and then we did Moon Knight, and then and then some other Marvel stuff. But in terms of doing this simultaneously, it was on the one hand insanely hard to come home from production on those things, and then come home and edit at night on this. It was rough, but also it's so energizing to do these things. They're so much self-expression, and it feels so good just to be doing it. And it was really hard, but then at the same time, there's a symbiotic relationship between the two things, where it can be really, really inspiring just to do something that's so wildly different with your night job versus your day job. And it can get really, really fulfilling, but also probably, would you say maybe the most physically exhausting time in our lives, probably?
Yeah. That was a lot of lost sleep, and but it was weirdly one of those fulfilling lost sleeps rather than oh my god, what am I gonna do? Because we knew what we were doing. You know, it felt there was a mission there of I think it was. It's not exact, but it's about 2 years, not to the day, but 2 years ago we wrapped. We wrapped on Halloween.
November 1st. So
Yeah, November 1st of 2020 on this film. And then we sent all the footage off to our poor editor, Michael Felker. And while he was sorting through kind of the first 3.5 hour long cut of it, we did Archive 81. Came back between Archive 81 and Moon Knight for 3 weeks, edited as much as we could ourselves, handed it back to Mike, and then while we're in Moon Knight, we would trade it back and forth in the evenings. And as Justin said, it was that was a lot. That was a lot. Not something. It's weird. It worked really well. It did. I can't be more glad that each project had the other project to live off of. And yet, I hope to never do it again. It was so tiring.
We were watching Midnight Mass in the Jordanian desert as we were finishing off this movie too. Like it was like a big part of our lives at the time. We would drive to set, just like binge watching those episodes in the Jordanian desert. It was a really wonderful memory.
There was actually genuinely there was inspiration. You're like, you can do that. We can do these things. You know, don't censor yourself. Mike's doing it on Netflix. Is #1 on Netflix. Do what that did. Do what he's doing. You know?
One of the things that you talk about the editorial process, I noticed, you guys all share editorial credit on this. There's an editorial style and structure to this movie that I think is unique to your work that leapt out at me right away. And I was trying to think of the right word for it while I was watching it. The word I kept coming up with was that I was watching you guys jamming. That I felt like I was sitting there watching musicians in a room together, just jamming, just kind of free-forming. That there was an incredible casual confidence to the way this was cut together. That you weren't afraid to throw me into a new visual just to accentuate a point for a couple of frames and then rip me right out of it. You're also jumping back and forth between different mediums. You're pulling what looks like authentic archival footage of yourselves in there as well. Various formats that you're putting in there. Can you talk about what types of differences aesthetically you guys are dealing with this? Because it feels to me like, especially with the context of the other work that you're doing, that you got to come home kind of cut loose on this and really, like the other thing I kept thinking was splatter painting. Like I was just like, it's starting to feel like Pollock. Like you guys are just, it's glorious to watch, but you're just kind of taking that whole canvas and aesthetically, it's rock and roll in a way that I haven't seen from you guys before.
So the movie, it's as scripted, the movie was always this sort of, I don't want to compare it, Lake Mungo is like one of the greatest horror films of all time. So I don't
Amen.
Yeah,
Of
right?
all time.
If you
All
haven't
time.
seen Lake Mungo, go watch it tonight.
But it was a point of inspiration for this, and the movie is scripted in terms of like, oh yeah, the documentary content of it, the interviews, if you read the script, it's like, oh, it's always been a documentary, but there was a stylistic documentary thing that wasn't in the original script that Aaron and I, when we were rehearsing, we stumbled upon at one point, and it was the cutaways to all this stuff you're talking about. And it may sound like super obvious, like, yeah, well, it was always a documentary, why would you not do that? I don't know why we didn't, but when we found that, we're just like, oh no, we owe like 300 extra shots.
295.
295 extra shots, and we weren't able to be present for it because we were off working, we were just elsewhere in the world. And so Dave, with our first, this movie was our first movie, indie film that had a second unit, anything. And Dave
The second unit was bigger than the first
running
unit.
295 additional shots. These things you're talking about.
Evan, who is currently shooting this Q&A shot, are all of the second unit stuff. So go ahead and applause for him.
Yeah, all that other footage. Do we have any filmmakers in the audience? Yeah. Oh my God! All right, it's just
Fucking
filmmakers
Los
all the way
Angeles.
down. All right. Well, then you can understand is we on the editorial side we're working with an enormous amount of mixed media formats. Probably every format because within the film we shot on a red camera mainly, but then also my character has this GH4 that he's holding right now, a DVX 100 from the early 2000s, which was like ye old Sundance winner film camera or digital camera if you remember that. An infrared camera that we bought in return from Amazon, a $25 Amazon security camera,
Your iPhone.
our iPhones, your Android phone. None of them have the same frame rate. It's a disaster. and then that's where we start. And then you go into stock footage, which is all shot with 8 billion different cameras. And then we got all this public domain footage, which is we had to become public domain lawyers basically to figure out what the hell was legal and not. To even use in the first place. And then we had to become experts on AI digital restoration of that because it was like potato quality. And then there was everything that Evan and Ariel and Dave did to cut into it. So there was absolutely a form of mania involved in the editorial process, just on a technical level, before you even get to the artistic level. And like, thank God for Michael Felker, who's not here, our editor, that edited along with us, and just everyone who was tolerant of the insanity.
It should be, I guess it should be noted too, the height footage from our childhoods. It is from our actual childhoods. And it was so interesting to be able to use that stuff and try to connect it to, thank you, to try to connect this childhood footage that was Aaron and I's actual real childhood footage to these fictional characters in the movie. But now that the movie's out into the world, there's this weird feeling of like, we created these characters to be so wildly different than who we are in real life that no one would confuse it with the personal, with being autobiographical in any way. So we very intentionally were consciously making them so different than us. And then in the end, we used our own real childhood footage to connect to them, which completely messed everything. Now people just think it's autobiographical,
Right.
And these are the last people, these are the last characters you want people thinking that's actually you. So, anyways, sorry about that.
But also, if anyone thinks this is autobiographical, I think they need to wonder about their sanity. This isn't the Blair Witch Project,
But if they're familiar with your work, they've seen the end list, they've seen you guys inhabit completely other, very, very different characters from that. And that brings up another point about your filmmaking that I really want to get into, which is that, just taking this movie, for example, you wrote this, Justin. Aaron, you're the cinematographer. You both directed it. You both starred in it, in a movie that is a two-hander. You're not surrounded by a huge ensemble cast holding you guys up. Then you're editing it, and you're populating it with footage. Well, Dave's got to go off and shoot a short film to help supplement your
nothing
edit.
short about that film.
Yes, to go shoot a secondary feature to cut into this.
You know how hard it is to get like 20 hours of footage to Budapest, after they were shot? Anyways, go on.
But you guys manage wearing all of these hats, and while kind of having that fire in your bellies that you only get by being DIY filmmakers, you also manage to be terrific actors, right? Which is infuriating, isn't it? Because
Mike, we're gonna cast you in our next movie. You're gonna totally understand. You're gonna love it.
shit, not going to ruin your next movie.
Going down. What's happening?
But that's something that you guys, this is not the first time you've done this. You guys have worn all of these hats before. You've demonstrated that you're capable of handling a movie both in front of and behind the camera at an incredibly sophisticated level. How is it even possible for you guys to juggle? I know what I have to deal with every day on set, wearing one hat, just directing and worrying about the edit. How do you guys go through what you have to go through to act, to make these characters come to life? Because these are beautifully performed characters. How do you balance all of that on set practically? What does it look like?
Well, the real secret is no real secret at all, which is just we just rehearse a lot, and that's where when people kind of talk about the jazz that happens on set, that's where it really happens for us. Is that's where we're like working our way through the stuff that hasn't yet been figured out. And so those days are very free-form. There's nobody around. It's just us, and we try it until it makes sense in both of our brains, and we know that it functions. And so we have because it's totally free, and it was at that time the pandemic. We just had infinite time. We had a lot of time to just figure out everything. So we rehearsed. We were able to rehearse on location, and I think that made it a lot easier. We did the same thing with The Endless, where you can just kind of, it's the big cloud, the point cloud in your head of what the movie needs to, what it could be before it congeals into what it is. We're able to get it mostly to that congealed point before we even arrive on set. And that really helps a lot. And then also, though, there's another piece of it, which is, this is funny because you don't need it to be this way, but because it was this way, I don't know if we told you this or not, but there was nobody on set besides the three of us. Literally nobody. There was no crew at all. There was no sound department. There was nothing. There was, although I don't want to minimize a huge contribution from our art department, they had to be offset because of COVID stuff, and they would deliver us props in the morning, and we would, sometimes trade, be like, all right, time to paint the wall, and they would, we'd leave, and they would come in and all of that. But that made it feel like kind of like a black box theater, or not like theater. I'm sorry, because theater involves an element of performance. It felt like we were just still rehearsing with our friends, and that's what was great about it. Is there was no like, all right, guys, it's go time, because we have final cut. If it's bad, we know it's not going in. There's no stress at all, and so we could. Luckily, though, I think we only did a few takes each. Most of the time,
I will say that like you've been there. Every day was a closed set. There isn't 30 people standing around watching the two of them act. It was literally just me, just sitting. All three of us are very.
And so, do you give them feedback like after the take? Do you actually like, oh yeah, that was good?
We're good. If both of them are on camera, then I was the one giving them feedback. Or if one of them was on camera, the other was holding the camera, delivering lines very, very silently.
Well, and then I assume you're holding and flashing lights at them. Yeah, and you're lifting things in and out of their eye line, and you're also performing all of the effects of the film as well.
While monitoring sound.
Jesus.
Yeah.
Applause to Dave for running sound and also flashing that light for like 20 minutes at a time.
If you think the ode to joy means something different to you, I can't hear that without like immediately doing this with my finger, because that's just what it does now when I hear that song.
Also, it's also worth mentioning that of all these jobs, they're all so different. Like editing's this thing where it's like, well, when you're doing it, you're just like trying so hard to stay focused and keep doing it, and you want to put music on, but you can't because you're doing a temp sound design, but like really the reward of editing is you get to the end of the day or the next morning and you look at it, and you're like, oh, this actually looks pretty good. Like this is like working, But like when you're doing it, it's just like you're just stay focused, but you're not really sure. There's not at least, I don't know, for me, it's like not a ton of satisfaction in the moment, but the completion is it. Acting's really about, you just so much enjoyment in the moment. And it's so fun just to be doing it that is the reward. That is like, it's that you get to do it that is it's everything. It's so enjoyable. And not to say all these other jobs you do on set aren't enjoyable, it's just the enjoyment comes at it's not in real time, it's not right when you did it, it's later.
Dave, you were saying out in the lobby before we came in about how people are talking about that card that comes up at the very end that dedicates the movie in a sense to making movies with your friends. And as I picture the three of you guys kind of alone in this space making the film, that makes enormous sense. That's something I think. And for the other filmmakers out in the audience, I imagine this is a very shared experience. My first movie I made with my friends in my apartment. We didn't have lights. We tied a microphone to a mop handle.
This was Absentia?
That was, and that I do want to
A brilliant film.
Get to that because there's a fun connection there. But that sense of DIY filmmaking, I don't. Because I think it's very bad form to ask about what a movie costs. I hate it when people ask me. I'm not going to ask you what that is here in front of everybody. I'm absolutely going to ask you what that is as soon as we leave this room, because I need to know.
We're not ashamed of our $75 million budget.
But you guys have consistently always hit far outside of your weight class when it comes to budget. And that's not only in the sophistication of the movie that you've built, but it's in things like your visual effects. It's in your cinematography. I'm looking at this even in the beginning, and I'm watching those planes go by, and I'm looking at that plume of smoke, and I'm being like, God damn it, they did it again. They've been able to pull together VFX that are better than anything I've been able to pull off for Netflix for the last 5 years. How is it that you guys working such a small crew, working with really just yourselves, how is it that you're consistently able to kind of visualize these incredible things and bring them to life? Can you talk about your special effects and your visual effects at all?
It's funny because our general abilities with visual effects just happen to be precisely what works conceptually, which is I'm really good at putting stuff over the horizon. You know, like if you actually look at what's really happening in like the endless, like stuff on the horizon. You know, like there's stuff way far away.
Well, the endless, you've got that bit. You know, you've got that incredible concept of the rope going up into the darkness, right?
Yeah.
Incredible. And I thought that this was one of the most incredible effects I'd seen in a horror thriller in many years. And we have a few mutual friends. I was working with Shane on Dr. Sleep.
Who just won Best Actor at a film
Best
festival
Actor at Film
yesterday.
Fest, yeah.
Good for Shane.
Yeah.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
And I was able to kind of, you know, pick his brain about your work, and he was saying, oh yeah, no, the rope, that was just a ladder.
That was a ladder.
And
It was just
the rope up.
practical.
Yeah, and it's, you guys seem to be able to take the simplest tools and create these illusions with them that are incredibly effective. And I would just love to learn more about how you go about that.
I think it's really is it's a weirdly relatively small toolkit that we've gotten pretty damn good at getting at doing really well over the last while. You know, lighting stuff on fire, pretty good at it. You know, and so Justin and I can talk about that, and we write that bit into it because it also ends up weirdly. Having a good synchronicity with our themes that we end up working with. As I say, putting stuff on the horizon, the Spielbergian gaze upwards, you know, the wondering of what's in the sky, all of that. And so we just kind of gravitate towards it. But also, by the way, it's important for me to say that we, on this film, although I had originally intended to do all the visual effects myself, thank God, because we were doing Moon Knight, we brought in a wonderful VFX team that did, you know, more than 50% of those shots. But they were built so that they would kind of be that thing that we always do. That's kind of there's this thing that's very far away and it causes you to wonder. And then with the floating stuff, by the way, that's just, you know, Dave or Justin holding it on a pole. You know, you race the pole, shoot it in slow motion.
Honestly, like if you wonder how we do most of what we do, it's the least complicated thing you can imagine is what we did.
Even though you and I didn't have that first contact, I didn't know you when you guys worked together on coloring absentia. But right after Aaron did it, we were out scouting locations for our first feature resolution, and we're literally like driving down a dirt road in his Is it all Scion? The Scion? It smelled like cat pee.
R.I.P.
A cat had peed in it, I
R.I.P.
think.
Cat pee car.
And Vinny's making jokes about like why he's like when you bought this, where they were like, sir, would you like the cat pee smell? And you're like, yeah, I want yeah. And anyways, so we're driving on this dirt road in East County, San Diego, and Vinny's making bad jokes, and Aaron's like, by the way, he's like, I was looking at the script to Resolution the other day, this movie we're about to shoot that we're scouting locations for it, and he's like, there's a lot of similarities between it and this movie Absentia that I colored like last week. He's like he has that same feel to it. He started explaining Absentia to me. I was like, that sounds really interesting. And then, you know, cut to now, and it's like, oh wow, that's wild.
Yeah. It's surreal for me to be sitting here with you guys. But knowing we only have a few minutes left, I'm sure there are people who have questions who are thrilled that we talked.
By the way,
about
we're
this
going to
one.
go to the Naughty Pig after this to answer any questions that don't get answered here, which is like half a block down the street.
I'm sure we can get a couple in before that. Questions, anyone? Or they'll all be for the Naughty Pig. Yes, right back there.
Hi, guys. While making this movie, were there any rabbit holes that you guys ended up going down? Any theories that really caught your interest?
Did we go down any rabbit holes while we were making the movie? To be honest, I think I'm not. This sounds like a bit of a soundbite, but the first thing that popped into my head when you asked that question was that the movie itself was genuinely a rabbit hole. It is such an enigma to crack even for ourselves, which is one of the things that was so delightful about working on it, is that I have my own fan theories about what just happened. You know, we do know it. It is a cohesive story that isn't just randomly assembled together, but it's designed so that you can look at it from many different angles, and it works all those ways like a weird Sudoku puzzle. and we're really proud of that aspect of it. But designing it that way is particularly difficult. And then just on a practical level, I'll tell you the biggest rabbit hole for me, I think, was the public domain footage. Like, just going, it is so cool. Go to archive.org, look up the Prelinger archives, if that's how you pronounce it. I found some of the most interesting things I've ever seen in my whole life. I saw early Los Angeles, there was like a bunch of alligators sliding down like a slide built for them into Griffith Park. I found this one like weird public service announcement about crossing the road, but it looked like it was shot by Roger Deakins in like 1930. It's the most beautiful thing I've ever seen. It's called The City. And that's just like a couple things that pop into my mind, but that was definitely a rabbit hole, is public domain footage. Really worth it, and everyone here can do it, so.
And I saw another hand about 3 rows back.
Well, that was me, but I'm afraid the question is too similar. I was just curious, like, if you have any conspiracy theories that you believe in yourself, or is there something you find so fascinating about specifically one that you can't stop obsessing over, even if it might not be true?
Lately, I've been really interested in all the sort of very human conflicts within the UFO community. I find very interesting. Right now, there's like a lot of controversy over. There's like different groups, and like they all believe in some sort of non-human technology visiting Earth, but they like are like really going at each other over like who's right. And I find that like just the human aspect of that to be so interesting. What else? I mean, we've been working on a TV show that deals heavily in some of this stuff. So Aaron and I spent a lot of time on our rides on the way home from work talking about what we think. What does it mean when you say that this stuff is non-human? I don't know.
There's one this has very recently become one of those things that's no longer conspiracy theory and is just a fact because it's been uncovered. But I think it's absolute bullshit that the oil companies lied to us about climate change for 40 years. We kind of knew, but there was a whole bunch of studies that were funded by them to tell us that actually everything was okay, and they knew the whole time, and now we're fucked. So that's conspiracy theory that I pretty much hate. Yes.
I was curious if those recurring Pythagorean and Lateralis symbols, were you finding those all naturally around Boston?
No, none of those exist naturally. They're all a visual effect.
But those buildings, I mean, you can take a really fun little... Sorry, I just realized we haven't told you guys. This was shot a block from here.
Like literally.
We walked here. We live a block
that way.
away, and that's our apartment. Like you can do a little walking tour of this movie if you want to. So yeah.
That's actually your apartment?
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
Damn. Does it actually do any of that cool stuff?
Yeah, we saved a lot of money on VFX because of that.
There is actually a floating doorway. That thing, we were just like working on the movie one day, and I think Justin looked at it, he's like, what the hell is that? And we realized there's just this weird floating doorway that's just like 1.5 feet above
Although
ground level for no
if you
reason.
break into there, it's not what's on the other side of that.
Yeah, it's different. We'll tell you that story. Can't do that with microphones.
I think we probably have time for one more before we get kicked out. Yes, sir.
Yeah, I just had a question. During the writing process, when you were conceptualizing these two characters, what was important to you about developing who they were and fleshing them out so intimately? Like, what was interesting about those backstories, and why did you want to tell their stories specifically?
Wow, this would be, to actually answer this question, it would take so long, so I'm going to apologize. I'll just do a grab bag of a few things. One thing is that we had never done a movie where the third act didn't become about making sure that the science fiction or horror mythology or what it was crystal clear, and that was the point. Not the point of the film, but the genre stuff became way more prominent in the third act, and that was the point of it, was the revelation of that, solving the mystery. This movie was an opportunity to make the third act completely emotional and about completing the arc of these two guys and completing the exploration of who they are and the tragedy of each one of them, and that one of them ultimately dying because of the events of the film, and the other one arriving at arguably a fate worse than death, and completing those journeys and understanding who they were, and understanding despite all their flaws that they were still human beings who've got good things and bad things about them. Now, I mean, I suppose that could have just described any movie ever, but this one, it was just like, no, it was like that was a thing that was way more important than completely solving the genre film mystery thing. So there was that, and then for each character individually, trying to keep it brief, but with Levi, it was someone who, for him, witnessing the otherworldly or the supernatural and being able to confirm it as something real would allow him to feel as though he wasn't just worm meat, and that whatever happened with him and his sister, that it's okay, because there's something more to all of this, that there was something way more to his material existence. And in John's case, it was someone, actually, I'll let Aaron take it over. I'll keep rambling now.
John, I think, views him in the same exact way that he was trying to reassure himself that he's not worm meat, is that he views himself as, but for the circumstances of the world, he would be, that last man standing. He would be that, he views himself as like, oh, he should have been Steve Jobs. He should have been Elon. He should have been, one of these like people that like, their pure force of vision and will was something that would have actually gotten them, that could have changed the world. And so that's I think where we approached it from, was that he always believed that at least the ends that he was going towards, which was a transformation of the world, justified all the nonsense that he put Levi through. Nonsense is a very light word for what he put Levi through. Yeah.
Oh, and you should know that John and Levi are strongly based off of Walt and Jesse from Breaking Bad.
Down to the way we look. Like, it's just, like, it's funny, is like, people ask that question, we give these lengthy answers, and it's like, we could have just started with that. It's like, this is Walt and Jesse, but supernatural.
Now that's like all I've seen. That did not occur to me at all. That's awesome.
We
I think
realized
I saw
it a little late, actually. We're like, oh, damn it, we just did that.
but it's perfect. I think I saw one more hand right back. Yes, I think we can get that.
Yeah, so my question to you guys is, I was actually surprised with how much humor was in this movie. Did you find it hard to balance the humor along with the big concepts that you were trying to pull from and trying to make it like fit and be cohesive?
We have a really hard time not telling bad jokes. It's just like, we can't control it. It just like, it'll come out. And then when we're editing the movie together, it's always like, well, as long as it like doesn't veer off into like Anchorman territory. But Anchorman's one of the best films of all time. But like, as long as it doesn't like end up feeling like too much of a broad comedy, then we're okay. And we're also like both obsessed with Almost Famous. And you watch the rhythm of that movie, it's like no matter how dramatic or heartbreaking a scene is, there's always some moment of levity at the end of the scene. The example we always use is, what kind of beer?
Which, by the way, that scene in which John says, "Can I have a second beer to help me sleep?" That's actually just a direct reference to that scene in Almost Famous. No one's supposed to catch it, but that's what that is, where you're thinking they're about to smile and maybe say something nice to each other.
Nope.
They don't.
Well, I think that movie was spectacular. It was such a joy to see it on the big screen. I think that's the first time I've actually gotten to see your work in theater. Every other time I've seen it at home. But thank you so much for sharing this with us.
you.
Thank you for this wonderful Q&A.